The best military strategy of the Civil War was at Gettysburg. Let's have this conversation. The Battle of Gettysburg is recognized as one of the most crucial events in American history. Occurring from July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, in the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, it represented a significant turning point in the American Civil War. As one of the largest and most devastating confrontations of the conflict, Gettysburg not only influenced the trajectory of the war, but also played a vital role in the preservation of the Union. The results of this battle had extensive consequences, shifting the momentum towards the North and effectively ending Confederate General Robert E. Lee's campaign into Northern Territory. This event was instrumental in America's path toward unity and the abolition of slavery. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought over 3 days, is widely acknowledged as one of the most significant battles in American history, marking a decisive moment that halted the advance of Confederate forces and bolstered Northern morale, thereby increasing the likelihood of eventual Union victory and shaping the future of the nation. This small town became the location of one of the most pivotal battles during the American Civil War. The Battle of Gettysburg took place from July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, amidst the undulating hills and agricultural lands surrounding Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Situated in Adams County, approximately 35 miles southwest of Harrisburg, Gettysburg initially appeared to lack strategic importance. However, it emerged as the center of a significant confrontation due to the intersection of multiple roads in the vicinity. These roads inadvertently facilitated the encounter between the Union Army of the Potomac, under the command of General George G. Meade, and the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, led by General Robert E. Lee. This clash would ultimately influence the trajectory of the Civil War. The battle unfolded at several critical sites, including Cemetery Hill, Little Round Top, and Pickett's Charge, each contributing significantly to the battle's outcome. The Battle of Gettysburg is frequently regarded as a major turning point in the American Civil War for several important reasons. Primarily, it signified the conclusion of General Robert E. Lee's second and most ambitious incursion into the North. His objective was to secure a decisive victory on Union territory, which he believed would demoralize the northern states and potentially lead to international recognition and support for the Confederacy, or at the very least, prompt the North to consider peace negotiations. Nevertheless, the Union's triumph at Gettysburg dashed these aspirations, compelling Lee to retreat back to Virginia and marking the end of his aggressive campaigns in the North. The battle inflicted a severe setback on the Confederate Army, which endured more than 28,000 casualties, a significant loss from which it never fully recuperated. In contrast, the Union Army, despite suffering approximately 23,000 casualties, emerged with a strategic advantage that revitalized Northern confidence and morale. Furthermore, the timing of the victory at Gettysburg coincided with Union General Ulysses S. Grant's capture of Vicksburg on July 4, 1863, effectively dividing the Confederacy by securing control of the Mississippi River. These concurrent victories significantly hampered the Confederates' ability to resupply their forces and sustain their war efforts. The battle also had a profound effect on national sentiment. President Abraham Lincoln later utilized the Union triumph at Gettysburg as the context for his renowned Gettysburg Address, delivered in November 1863, where he reaffirmed the ideals of liberty and equality, redefining the conflict as a struggle not only to preserve the Union, but also to achieve a new birth of freedom through the abolition of slavery. Gettysburg not only halted the Confederate advance, but also elevated Union morale, marking the onset of the Confederacy's gradual decline, thus serving as a pivotal turning point in the Civil War. The American Civil War, which spanned from 1861 to 1865, was a brutal confrontation between the Union, representing the northern states, and the Confederacy, representing the southern states, centered on issues such as slavery, states' rights, and national unity. By 1863, following 2 years of intense conflict, the war had reached a critical crossroads. The Confederates, under the command of General Robert E. Lee, had secured several significant victories in the Eastern Theater, which instilled in them a sense of confidence to advance into Union territory. Their objective was to influence Northern public sentiment, gain international support, and potentially compel a negotiated settlement. In June 1863, Lee's forces crossed the Potomac River and entered Pennsylvania. At this time, the Union Army of the Potomac was experiencing a leadership transition, with General George G. Meade assuming command just days prior to the Battle of Gettysburg. Meade, a seasoned military leader, was charged with halting Lee's advance and safeguarding Washington, D.C. As the two armies approached each other, they unexpectedly met near Gettysburg. The landscape was diverse, characterized by rolling hills, open fields, rocky ridges, and notable sites such as Cemetery Hill, Little Round Top, and Seminary Ridge, all of which would be pivotal during the conflict. The weather in early July was marked by heat and humidity, exacerbating the already challenging conditions for the troops. On the initial day of combat, a thunderstorm threatened the battlefield, reflecting the mounting tension that would characterize the ensuing days. With the stage set, both armies braced for a confrontation that neither anticipated would evolve into the largest and most lethal battle of the war, ultimately shaping the conflict's trajectory. The principal figures in the Battle of Gettysburg were two of the most significant military commanders of the Civil War. General Robert E. Lee, the esteemed commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, was a prominent and strategic figure on the Confederate side. He had successfully led the Confederate forces to numerous victories in the Eastern Theater, earning a reputation for his audacious tactics and readiness to embrace risks. His decision to launch an invasion into the North in 1863 was part of a larger strategy aimed at undermining Union morale and possibly compelling a negotiated settlement. On the Union side, General George G. Meade had recently been appointed as the commander of the Army of the Potomac just days prior to the Battle of Gettysburg. An experienced military leader, Meade was recognized for his methodical defensive strategies. Despite his recent elevation to command, he swiftly mobilized the Union troops to counter Lee's incursion, and his leadership during the conflict was instrumental in securing a Union victory. Both generals confronted the formidable task of directing their forces through 3 days of fierce combat, with a combined total of over 165,000 soldiers, rendering the Battle of Gettysburg one of the largest confrontations of the war. The decisions made by each general during this engagement would not only determine the battle's outcome, but also significantly influence the trajectory of the war. The battle unfolded across the diverse and rugged landscape surrounding the small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This region was characterized by a combination of open fields, orchards, and undulating hills interspersed with rocky formations and ridges. Significant geographical features that would be crucial during the battle included Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, Little Round Top, and Big Round Top, as well as Seminary Ridge and the notorious open field where Pickett's charge would later take place. These elevations and open areas offered both armies strategic benefits and obstacles, shaping their tactics throughout the 3-day engagement. The weather in early July 1863 was characteristic of a Pennsylvania summer, marked by high temperatures and humidity, with readings reaching the mid-80s Fahrenheit, approximately 30 degrees Celsius. The combination of oppressive heat and humidity, along with the dense smoke generated by artillery and musket fire, created extremely challenging conditions for the soldiers. Many were already fatigued from extensive marches leading up to the battle, and the weather significantly influenced the course of events. Throughout the 3 days of conflict, there were intermittent rain showers and thunderstorms, which further complicated the situation for the combatants. Despite these adverse conditions, both armies remained steadfast, with the environment and weather playing crucial roles in the battle's dynamics. The Battle of Gettysburg commenced on the morning of July 1, 1863, when Confederate troops, commanded by General A.P. Hill, clashed with Union cavalry led by General John Buford near McPherson's Ridge, located just west of Gettysburg. Although Buford's cavalry was significantly outnumbered, they managed to delay the Confederate advance long enough for Union infantry reinforcements commanded by General John Reynolds to arrive. Unfortunately, Reynolds was killed early in the engagement, which dealt a severe blow to Union morale. As the day wore on, additional Confederate divisions, led by Generals Richard Ewell and Jubal Early, joined the fray, intensifying their assault on Union forces. The Confederates effectively outflanked the Union troops on the northern and western peripheries of Gettysburg, overpowering them at McPherson's Ridge. By late afternoon, under intense pressure, the Union Army began to withdraw through Gettysburg towards the elevated positions on Cemetery Hill, situated just south of the town. Despite suffering a setback on the first day, the Union forces were able to regroup and establish a robust defensive stance on Cemetery Hill, as well as on the adjacent Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge. The initial day of combat, which culminated in a Confederate triumph, established the framework for the ensuing conflict. Although the Confederates succeeded in pushing back the Union forces, they did not take advantage of their momentum to advance further before nightfall. This oversight permitted the Union Army to entrench themselves and fortify their defensive positions, which would prove vital in the days to come. The engagements on the first day also heralded the onset of what would evolve into the largest and most devastating battle of the war, with both factions recognizing the significant strategic implications of this confrontation. The Union's ability to establish strong defensive positions on Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, and Cemetery Ridge, forming a robust defensive line resembling a fishhook, was a direct consequence of the Confederates' failure to exploit their initial success. The first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, on July 1, 1863, thus held profound importance, influencing the subsequent intense fighting and determining the overall trajectory of the battle. These positions occupied elevated terrain, granting the Union a considerable tactical edge. General George Meade, who had recently taken command of the Union Army of the Potomac, adeptly utilized the landscape to his advantage, recognizing that a defensive stance would be essential for enduring further Confederate offensives. Although the Confederates managed to push the Union forces back, their failure to decisively attack Cemetery Hill before the Union had fully fortified their position proved to be a pivotal moment. General Robert E. Lee aimed to achieve a swift victory over the Union Army on Northern Territory, and the initial Confederate successes on the first day may have bolstered his belief in the feasibility of such an outcome. However, General Richard Ewell, who succeeded the more aggressive Stonewall Jackson following his death earlier in the conflict, hesitated to launch an assault on Cemetery Hill as the day drew to a close, contrary to Lee's expectations. This indecision allowed the Union to bolster their defenses, which would present a significant challenge for the Confederates in the ensuing days. The importance of the first day also extended to the psychological effects on both armies. For the Confederates, it reinforced their sense of momentum, following a series of victories in earlier engagements, such as Chancellorsville, instilling confidence that their incursion into the North could succeed. Nevertheless, their failure to decisively eliminate the Union presence on that day began to sow doubts regarding the viability of Lee's offensive strategy in this context. Conversely, for the Union, despite the initial retreat and setback, the successful establishment of a robust defensive position elevated morale and set the stage for the determined resistance they would exhibit over the following 2 days. More broadly, the first day established the battle as one of attrition rather than maneuver, while the Confederates would persist in launching bold and aggressive assaults, particularly on the second day against the Union flanks, and culminating in Pickett's charge on the third day, they would be confronted by a well-entrenched and fortified adversary. The Union's capacity to maintain control over the elevated terrain secured on the initial day proved to be a pivotal element that ultimately contributed to their triumph at Gettysburg, thereby permanently altering the trajectory of the Civil War in their favor. The second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 2nd, 1863, was characterized by fierce combat as Confederate troops initiated aggressive offensives against both sides of the Union Army. A significant point of contention was Little Round Top, a hill of strategic importance located on the Union's left flank. The defense of this position was crucial, as the side that held the high ground would possess a superior vantage point over the battlefield. As day broke, Confederate General James Longstreet ordered his forces to engage the Union flanks, commencing with an attack on Little Round Top. Union Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, in command of the 20th Maine, was assigned the critical task of defending this essential location. Despite facing daunting odds, Chamberlain and his troops fought tenaciously against relentless Confederate assaults. In a remarkable development, he commanded a daring bayonet charge when his men were nearly out of ammunition, successfully repelling the Confederate forces and securing Little Round Top for the Union. Concurrently, intense fighting occurred at Devil's Den, a rocky formation that also held significant strategic importance. Confederate forces executed coordinated strikes against Union positions, leading to brutal close-quarters combat and substantial casualties. Although the Union forces faced setbacks at times, they succeeded in holding vital locations throughout the day, often at a considerable cost. The toll was heavy on both sides, with the Union suffering around 8,000 casualties and the Confederates enduring similar losses. The strategic significance of Little Round Top is paramount. Securing this location enabled the Union forces to retain dominance over the battlefield, thwarting any attempts by the Confederates to outflank their positions. The Union's effective defense was crucial in allowing them to continue repelling Confederate assaults throughout the day. As the combat extended into the night, both factions reorganized, bracing for the decisive confrontations that would occur on the battle's final day. The second day not only showcased the unwavering resolve of the soldiers, but also represented a pivotal moment that reinforced the Union's defensive posture, paving the way for their eventual triumph at Gettysburg. The intensity of the fighting on this day was marked by significant casualties on both sides. The conflict was characterized by fierce close-quarters engagements, with troops vying for control of vital terrain features such as Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and Culp's Hill, as Confederate forces under General James Longstreet launched their offensives. They encountered staunch resistance from the Union Army, led by General George Meade. The battle for Little Round Top was particularly distinguished by its intensity. Chamberlain's 20th Maine Regiment, stationed at the summit, endured relentless attacks from Confederate brigades, including units from Texas and Alabama. The combat in this rugged, uneven landscape was tumultuous, with many soldiers resorting to hand-to-hand fighting as they fought tenaciously to hold their ground. The engagement at Devil's Den was similarly fierce, with sharpshooters taking refuge among the boulders and trees, creating a perilous environment for both combatants. The landscape, marked by steep inclines and rocky formations, restricted visibility and compelled troops into constrained positions, complicating the coordination of movements for commanders. This situation resulted in confusion and fierce firefights that frequently escalated into individual acts of valor and desperation. By the conclusion of the day, Union forces had sustained approximately 8,000 casualties, while the Confederates faced a comparable number, if not more. The fierce combat not only led to considerable losses in terms of personnel, but also adversely affected morale and leadership, with numerous officers from both sides being killed or injured. For example, the injury of key leaders such as Union General Daniel Sickles at Devil's Den had a detrimental effect on troop organization and operational effectiveness. The substantial casualties underscored the resolve of both factions to achieve victory at Gettysburg. Union soldiers, committed to defending their territory and maintaining the Union, exhibited remarkable courage, while the Confederates aimed to leverage their numerical advantage to secure a decisive victory on Northern soil. This day of intense conflict highlighted the harsh realities of the Civil War and the significant toll it exacted on soldiers and their families, leaving a lasting impact on the trajectory of the conflict and American history. Little Round Top was of considerable strategic significance during the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Its elevated location provided a commanding view of the battlefield, making it a vital point for artillery deployment and troop maneuvers. Control of this hill was essential for both Union and Confederate forces, as the side that held it could more effectively observe and influence the surrounding terrain, potentially altering the outcome of the battle. The elevation of Little Round Top afforded the Union Army a strategic position from which to monitor Confederate movements and effectively coordinate their artillery fire. This vantage point enabled Union forces to detect advancing enemy troops from afar, thereby enhancing their defensive preparations and safeguarding their flanks. Securing Little Round Top was crucial for the protection of the Union's left flank. Had the Confederates succeeded in taking this position, they could have easily outflanked the entire Union line, jeopardizing the Army's integrity and potentially leading to a rout, as well as gaining control over essential routes. The hill was strategically located along key roads and pathways that linked various sections of the battlefield. Dominion over Little Round Top allowed the Union to more effectively manage troop deployments and movements throughout the battlefield. The Union forces swiftly acknowledged the strategic importance of this position and reinforced it with troops led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain. As the Confederates initiated their attacks, Chamberlain's 20th Maine established a formidable defensive line on the hill. Employing effective defensive strategies, Chamberlain took advantage of the terrain. His soldiers entrenched themselves and utilized the natural features of the hill for protection, complicating the Confederate forces' advance. When ammunition supplies dwindled and the Confederate assault intensified, Chamberlain executed a daring bayonet charge. This unforeseen tactic surprised the attacking Confederates, resulting in a counteroffensive that successfully repelled them and secured Little Round Top. Chamberlain's leadership was instrumental in sustaining morale among his troops. His resolve and creative tactics motivated the troops under his leadership, cultivating a spirit of resilience and purpose despite daunting challenges. The coordination with other Union forces was vital. The Union's capacity to sustain communication and collaboration with neighboring units, including those stationed on Culp's Hill, facilitated a more cohesive defense along the left flank. This synergy enabled mutual assistance and reinforcement during pivotal moments of the conflict. Ultimately, the effective defense of Little Round Top not only thwarted the Confederates from achieving a critical advantage, but also reinforced the Union's defensive positions for the duration of the battle. The result of this confrontation was instrumental in the Union's eventual triumph at Gettysburg, rendering Little Round Top a symbol of bravery and strategic importance within the broader narrative of the Civil War. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting histories